I'm Wesley ter Haar. I founded Media.Monks 22 years ago when we started with S4. Thank you. Great. We started with S4 4 years ago. 2 slides on us, 9,000 people globally, single P&L. We help our clients consolidate their spend across a bunch of different subject matter expertise. And because of that, we can help them innovate. And that to me is really key to what we'll be discussing here today. If we go to the next slide. And it sort of proves out in our client base, we innovate for the world's most innovative companies. Okay, let's get started. Next slide, Mr. Jake. Our industry is obsessed about the future. We keep pointing at it, talking about it, vaguely referencing that something will happen. For me, speed happens so quickly now, change happens so quickly now that we have to talk about now. And when we look at what's happening now, I would point to the transformation of digital. If the last decade was about digital transformation, lots of companies putting in the piping and plumbing to be more digitally native, focus on e-commerce, CRM, etc., etc. The last few years, we've seen a complete transformation of digital. And we tried to use the Web3 nomenclature. I don't think that quite stuck. But if we look at what's driving it, if we go to the next slide, it really comes down to a few quick beats. One, people aren't just spending more time online, right? COVID compressed the timeline on a bunch of trends. Some of this is generational. It isn't just about the time spent. It's actually about the value of that time. So I'm 44, a young 44. When I spend time on my phone, I worry if I'm spending too much time on my phone. Am I wasting my time? That's a generational difference, right? If you're younger, you don't necessarily see that as wasted time. It is as valuable as time you spend in real life. And this sort of was hit home about a year ago. We got a brief from one of our gaming clients, and the brief said, our players have decided gaming is a meaningful life pursuit. When I heard that initially, it sort of felt uncomfortable to me. I'm like, that shouldn't be right. You should be out there playing in the sunshine. To age myself, when we started Media.Monks, it was very much the idea of second life, right? Early metaverse. You would spend time in digital places, and that was second life. The main takeaway is it's just life now. Time spent on machines and in screens is as valuable as time we get to spend in real life, especially if you look at the generations that are coming up. So this is really the transformation of digital. Another really important beat here, Jake, if we go to the next slide. The industry over the last decade, pretty much as far as I can remember, has been dominated by the duopoly. Meta, formerly Facebook, already shows massive amount of change in that space. And Google, for the first time in a very long time, no longer the #1 website in the world, because that's TikTok now. Again, generational change. Really interesting piece of insight from the head of search at Google last year. Something like 40% of young people, when they're looking for a place for lunch, they don't go to Google Maps like I would or Google Search. They actually go to TikTok, right? Transformation of digital. I'm getting a yes. Love it. Next slide. So normally what I would do in these presentations, I would talk about all of the new behaviors and expectations, some of them related to sort of the COVID trend compression, some of them related to generational differences. And then if we go to the next slide, I would give you an amazing roadmap on all of the new technologies and talent and team needs that you as brands and businesses now need to focus on to be able to answer those new behaviors and expectations. I'm not going to do that today because yes, new paths of growth sit here, Web3, different versions of ownability and community, decentralization. It's really interesting. But with the 10 minutes I have left, I just want to say one thing really clearly and concisely, which is the AI revolution, and specifically the generative AI revolution, it isn't just coming, it is completely here. And as somebody that has looked at this space over the last 6 or 7 years, what has happened in the last 6 months for me personally is somewhere between mind-blowing and mind-bending. And I sort of know what's going on. So the 10 minutes I have left, I want to sort of do a little rallying cry for everybody here that this is happening. We go to the next slide. Yes, it has sort of hit cultural conversation and consciousness because of ChatGPT. Who here watched the South Park episode last week? Nice. Pretty funny. It has captured the news cycle, right? And yes, Bill Gates, there are some personal reasons and preference why he talks it up, of course. But it's not just what's happening here. We go to the next slide. We're seeing that first wave of investor hearts and minds, stock up and down depending on the AI-related news. BuzzFeed had a huge peak. Alpha actually had a bit of a crash because of what happened with Bing in one of their own demos. And then the last slide on this section, our industry, marketing, advertising, is a buzz. Like it is always a buzz when there's a new buzz. Let's be honest, our industry is not necessarily set up to innovate at the speed and with the ambition that will be needed, because it's going to revolutionize, disrupt, and undermine a lot of existing business models and ways of working. Which means, we'll go to the next slide. One more note. By the way, everything that's happening right now, ChatGPT, Midjourney, DALL-E, all of these pieces of technology, tool sets, research papers, they will have a next big release in the next few months. Right? The speed at which this will keep changing is exponential. ChatGPT 4 is launching next week. Lots of rumors about what that means. Some have referenced video generation. You can sort of see where this is heading year over year over year. Which means if you're in this room, you have to plot yourself on this spectrum. Are you a bear or a bull? The bear case is as follows. This is just another hype cycle. We saw it with Web3, we saw it with Metaverse. Peaks massively. The technology isn't quite mature enough to deliver on the initial intent and promise. People get very disappointed, it crashes down, but the foundation is higher and it grows from there. That could be your case. And you could underpin it with, we as humans are amazing, we will never be replaced. Human creativity is the pinnacle of our existence. That is the bear case. The bull case is no. This is industry changing and really industries changing. And then you have to start throwing around very big terms, paradigm shifts, industrial revolutions. If you would ask me where I plot on this, I'm way more to the bullish side. Here we go to the next slide, Jake. Because what I've seen in the last 6 months, after talking about it for years and years and years and years, is a massive jump where it was a cool, shiny toy, and it is now completely usable as an actual tool. And from that functionality, it's growing immensely quickly. Here we go to the next slide. Just a little sort of aha moment for me personally. This is completely generated to the right. So generative AI in general, it really just is a reference to algorithms that generate media of some sort. This is completely generated based on a prompt, The Shining in the style of Wes Anderson. That's actually quite a nuanced creative brief. And if I would brief a production team on that and they would come back with this, I would be extremely impressed. I was like, you got me. That's exactly what I wanted to see. This is fully generated, right? That was a massive aha moment for me. We go to the next slide. If you would ask me what are the headwinds, it's not the functionality, it's not the technology. The headwind is going to be legal. Quick explainer. The algorithm learns from data sets, and then when you ask it something, it will take what you've asked, it will combine it with what it's learned, and it will generate something net new. This is going to be a massive copyright and IP discussion for years to come. There will be lots of lawsuits. This is the headwind why it might not hit as quickly at the enterprise level as it probably could or should, because nobody quite knows how this is going to play out. There was a comic book that has all of the images AI generated via Midjourney. It initially got a copyright stamp. It has now been revoked because something created by a machine cannot be copyrighted. Doesn't feel like that's a sustainable point of view for me in the next 6 months, let alone 6 years. So it's going to fundamentally change what we understand to be IP and copyright law and how we get to play in that space. Here we go to the next slide. Back to now. It is massively powerful, but it is far from perfect. But if you're in any of these areas, you should be interested in what it can do for you right now. Content production, massive ability to scale, to personalize, to optimize. Media already a heavy sort of AI machine learning input. It will completely change how we think about media buying and media targeting in the next 2 years, and will upend industries. Data insights is really what ChatGPT does, right? It takes massive amounts of data and it can parse it into what you want to know. And then code, which is really interesting. If you look at Copilot, which is a part of a Microsoft tool set, developers that use the Copilot widget, 40% of their code is already generated via AI, which was something that really as an industry we thought would not be possible for decades to come. It's happening right now. We go to the next slide. So even with what we know, you can plot it. It's going to completely change how we think about customer interfacing, customer journeys, anything from awareness to conversion to loyalty across data, technology, media, and all of the creative and asset and production outputs that you'll see across all channels. This is not difficult to predict. This will happen. We don't know what we don't know. Literally, something happens every day that makes me more bullish on the case and less bearish. Here we go to the next slide. A few more minutes to go. So I'm sharing some of my both excitement and anxiety. It's a balance. There's still new paths to growth though. So with a few minutes left, let's look at what I would be doing if I was a brand or a business. Number one. Oh, Jake. So A to Z testing. The problem with digital advertising has always been we can test everything, but the ROI case becomes really difficult, right? You spend a lot of money on making more versions. The upside that you get from better conversion after testing doesn't really trade off against the money you have to spend. That's over. We can finally battle creative fatigue, which is probably the biggest compressor of sort of conversion and media value in today's digital landscape. Next slide. That means we can get back to delivering on the original promise of digital advertising, personalization, targeting, something that feels, I'm going to say, fun and seamless and useful and authentic and contextual instead of a disruption. Finally, that would actually be possible. If we go to the next slide. I hope nobody here works at an in-house agency. I don't believe that headcount is going to survive. I think there's a next wave of this, which is the AI in-house agency. I think it plays into macro where people want less headcount. I think we'll see massive changes to the in-house agency space. Go to the next slide. Brand-trained algorithms, train it on your tone of voice, your point of view, your brand design systems, your data sets. All of this will become moats that you need to build as a business and a brand. And if we go to the next slide, you need that data because you need to learn how to be an interface. If Web 2 was about being easy to interface with for digital consumers, CRM, e-commerce, data asset management, this wave is going to be about being able to interface with the assistants. Right? We're asking our assistant to figure out 20 things. That assistant needs to be able to interface with your business, your data, your commerce flows. It's completely going to change how we think about e-commerce, search engine marketing, optimization, etc. If we go to the next slide. And everyone here is late. But don't worry about it, because that's just the nature of what's happening. It's happening so quickly that I feel that I'm late, and I've been in it for quite a while. The balancing act is just make sure you're not too late. Jake, next slide. So, little plug. We just dropped our AI Revolution will be generated think piece. There's a QR code on the next slide if you want to download it. Jake, can we go one back? So now it's going to be about more with less. Very much connected to sort of the macro landscape. We're very nearly at actual promise of digital advertising, hyper-personalization, seamless interfaces. And then I think this concept of brand AI and how you become an interface for other interfaces and machines is going to be key when you look at future success. The Skynet is falling. We go to the next slide. In my 10 minutes, my main message is generative AI is real, and it's really happening right now. And that's my 15 minutes. Thank you.
Nice job.